Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, from the beautiful state of Maine on a blustery November day. We're continuing ever so slowly forward on my personal street/race Powerglide project for my 64 Dodge Dart, soon to be LS swapped, single turbo, cheap, thrills, car. Today it's all about the front pump. If you watched the videos up until this point, Powerglides did have a rear pump. And in this case, I eliminated it. And after 1967, GM did that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So today it's all about the front pump. It's a very good unit, seemingly lasting forever. These are my age, if that tells you anything. And they're both perfect examples. I stripped two transmissions complete, and I chose the rusty one to work on, but they're both excellent examples, really no wear. They have very similar, and we're going to go over the modifications required to use them in a racing application. And I believe I mentioned it, but I'll say it again. There's choices you need to make along the way. I'll cover them and show you what I did. These are the two pumps that I had to work with. The one closest to me is a 1965, just like me, that now looks brand new thanks to 2 days of soaking in the Evaporust solution. This transmission was quite rusty, whereas the 1968 transmission, which has a late 67 pump, I haven't even cleaned it. It looks fantastic. It's probably the nicest one I've ever seen. And at this point, I almost have enough parts to build two Powerglides, so it'll probably end up in the second one. The first thing I did, using the TSR Stator tube removal tool, was to put it in the red press and push out the tube. You don't have to replace the Stator tube or remove it to do the modifications. I did because my original tube, while it would probably clean up, was quite pitted. It's not hardened. You can see where this one's blue. It's hotter. It comes pre-modified if you were to run a front stator bushing. I'm not. I'll cover that on the input shaft and talking about torque converters. It's the same as a 400. Need a bushing in the converter. We've gone down this road, but I'll recap it later on. But original Powerglides did not have a front stator bushing, and neither will I. If you choose not to remove your stator bushing and do the mods as is, you just need a long drill bit, because this is the first hole I drilled. This is converter charge pressure, and you need a long drill bit to clear the stator tube. The original hole is small, about 1/8 inch. It intersects this passage down below. So you drill this to 1/4 inch. Where it intersects this hole, I drilled this one 1/4 inch all the way down through. It had casting flaws and stuff, but it was pretty much already 1/4 inch. And now you can see I've tapped it for 5/16 course. The same brass set screw I put in a Turbo 400 front pump. And I drilled this to 1/8 inch. So now my converter charge pressure is tunable by simply changing the size of the hole in my restrictor. While you have the 1/4 inch drill bit in the drill, continue around to these rectangular holes and run the drill into this one. This one was already pretty much 1/4 inch. I just cleaned up any casting flaws it would have had. And more importantly, this one, when people talk about Powerglide pumps, they call these the pant legs. And picture this being a clock. This would be 11 o'clock. This hole at 11 o'clock needs to be bored down through. It intersects the stator tube. It needs to be 1/4 inch all the way through. If you pressed out your tube, the highest of the two holes needs to line back up when you press it back in. And you continue to check to make sure when this hole lines up with that, you're at the right depth. That and I pre-measured from the top to the pump surface. So as you press this down in, it is splined, like I said, but there's a lot of choices there. So you make marks on it and you slowly press it down. until this hole intersects that upper hole. There's only two in the stator tube. One there and one there. The higher one has to line up at 11 o'clock from the pant legs. That one. So we drilled that one, and that one 1/4 inch. And while you got the 1/4 inch drill bit out, this hole, and this hole, just make sure they're clean. They're already pretty much 1/4 inch, but just make sure there's no flashing in them. We already had the drill bit out. Might as well make sure everything flows like it should. This small hole provides lubrication for either your thrust washer, or in my case, I'm going to have a thrust bearing. Originally, it was very small, if you can see it in my picture. I opened this one up to 110 thousandths. Then I swapped to a 3/16 drill bit. One of these holes is already existing, and I just ran the drill bit through, if I can do this with no hands here, through to the other side. So you get double the lube on the high clutch drum bushing. Remember, we put an extra wide bushing in there. Now we're going to increase the lube flow. Originally, it only had one hole. Some had no holes. So if it had no holes, drill one all the way through. If you have one, make it two. It occurs to me I should mention, while opening up this lube hole for the front thrust washer or bearing, don't drill through the stator tube. I had the stator tube out, so I just drilled through, no problem. If you're doing this modification with the stator tube in place, don't drill this one all the way through. I'll give you the same warning when we were drilling this side. The only one that goes through the stator tube is the one at 11 o'clock. The other two we modified, the converted charge and the one next to it, there we are right here, do not intersect the stator tube. So don't drill through. I hope that's clear. Clear as mud, right? So the only hole that goes through the stator tube is the one at 11 o'clock. The Sonex replacement stator tube has a more bold spline with more interference fit to help prevent the stator tube from spinning. I also put retaining compound on it, Loctite cylindrical pot bonding compound, on the splines when I pressed it in. You don't have to do any more than that. But of course, I have all these tools, I might as well use them, right? So I chose, using the Sonex instruction for their larger stator tube, they make the big boy, has a bigger shaft. That one they pin in two places. I only chose to pin my original replacement shaft in one spot. So I drilled, following the Sonex instructions, through the stator tube. Yes, I made another hole, but this is not for the modifications we spoke of a minute ago. This is to drill and pin the stator tube. The only way to do it is to drill through the tube, and then you carefully run your tapered, your normal 1/4 inch 28 tap until the hole in the stator tube is tapered. The tap didn't go all the way through, but the set screw goes through the pump body into the stator tube a little bit, but doesn't stick out. And then you take a little burr or sanding disc and you make sure it's perfectly smooth. So now the stator tube is not going anywhere. Optional modification, probably worth the effort. This tin thing is the downshift timing valve right there. I've removed it from my pump. You can remove it and toss it. You don't have to plug the hole. There's no other modifications to do. You don't need it. It doesn't need to be there. It's one more thing to fall apart because it has parts inside it. Just chuck it and you'll be better off. This rig here with the poppet, the ball, spring-loaded ball in the middle, which is ported to this hole right here, is a cooler bypass valve. If something happened in your cooler circuit, it would open up and provide lube oil to the internals of your transmission. So something could happen to your cooler, or any other reason why your converter charge got really high, this will open up and still lube your transmission. You wouldn't notice until your transmission overheated. Most everybody agrees it's okay to leave this here. Now, for instance, in a Turbo 400, this doesn't exist. So if something happens to your cooler, you're going to suffer the consequences. In this case, it's there. There's really no reason to take it out. If you want to take it out, you can put a 9/16 cut plug in there, or you can drill and tap this hole. You need to plug these holes somehow, and often these bosses on the back have a hole drilled in them for other reliefs. So not all Powerglide pumps are the same, so if any of these three bosses have a hole, you need to plug from the other side. So not a case in either pump I had. I chose to leave the cooler bypass as is. This rig here in the mouse hole with the roll pin is called the primer valve. When there's no pressure on it, it allows fluid, I guess, to fill the gears. We don't need that. But here, remember I mentioned you have choices? You do have choices to leave it functional. Our goal is to remove this very vulnerable roll pin. When you turn up the pressure in a Powerglide, this thing's prone to breakage. The valve that's inside will fly out of there, and now you have nothing. You're not making pressure. You're squirting it all out this hole. You're not going anywhere. So some people drill for a larger roll pin, and they leave the valve goes in first, and then there's a spring right here. My valve's installed right now, but I can show you the end of it. So there's a valve here that goes in the hole first, the spring and a roll pin. If you choose to, take a 1/4-inch pipe tap, and you can tap in to the dimension of the roll pin where it was. If you want to leave the valve active, you got to drill a 3/16 hole in the pipe plug so it'll vent, just like that can vent, and then reassemble it. The valve goes in first. You'd put the spring back in. You'd put the plug in. It has a hole in it. It'll function as intended. Option number 2. Again, you could put the bigger roll pin in. You can put the valve in its normal direction and leave the spring out, and it'll function as intended minus the spring. It'll be closed all the time. The best option I chose was to turn the valve around. So if you look down in here, that's the valve, and it's now backwards, where originally you could see a little piton on the end. That's the correct position originally. I chose to turn it around. In doing so, my primer valve no longer works, and now I have to make sure that I tapped in enough. You can see the pipe plug threads, that isn't a leak as well. I need to make sure the pipe plug plugs off the roll pin holes, which I did. So now it's just gone forever. It's not a problem. Tapping this isn't difficult. You just have to be careful for the pump surface. I had to use a wrench. You can't get any tap driver on there. But if you take your time, keep checking your depth. If you're trying to reuse it with a hole in it, in my case, I had to make sure I went deep enough to plug the holes. And now, congratulations, we're done modifying the back half of the pump. The front really requires nothing other than a good cleaning, a new bushing, a new seal, and proper checking for wear. And in my case, I chose to get a new set of gears. I'm actually still waiting for them, so I can't assemble my pump. I literally just finished modifying it, and they should be here no later than Monday. But it's a simple matter of measuring the depth. Normal procedure, nothing to it. You may notice a Powerglide pump doesn't have a pressure regulator built in. In a Powerglide, that's in the valve body. And we'll cover that when we get to the valve body. You could round this crescent a little bit if you felt the need to. I'm not going to. This is just a stain where my pump gear is set, but this pump is really nice. Not as nice as that one, but it's a close second. And it's my first choice in this one because, I don't know, I guess I felt sorry for it. It needed the most work, and now it's beautiful. Powerglide pump gears did come in steel or cast. I believe these to be steel. You can tell there's different identifiers on them. these would have cleaned up, these soaked, and they'd probably shine up, but for 20 something dollars, I feel a set of pump gears isn't going to hurt it. And the Stator tube, if you were wondering, was like 60 bucks. So I'm going to dump 100 bucks into my pump. Reman pumps start around 400-ish. And there's billet pumps that are, I don't know, I haven't checked the price on them, but I'm sure more than that. And so the aftermarket Stator tube is hardened, is modified if you wanted to run the Stator bushing, which I don't. Whereas a stock tube, you'd have to machine that out to make it fit. So, some normal assembly procedures, and this pump is ready to go. That concludes our pump modifications. It's just a casting, and if you have a set of sharp drill bits, it goes really easy. I forgot to mention, for instance, this additional lube hole we put on the back. To chamfer it a little bit, I just step up a couple drill sizes and just touch the drill on the smaller hole, and it'll put a nice chamfer in it. You don't need a special tool. Just step up a couple drill sizes. Way back in the day, when I first started doing Powerglides, again, it was kind of the dawn of using them. A lot of these modifications weren't done, but over time, you know, they become popular modifications. If you were to buy a stock pump, you would hope that most of the stuff had been done to it. Over the years, experience has proven to be sound modifications. I like to read as much as I possibly can, read what material's available, and choose the mods that are right for me. And in this case, that's exactly what I did. So, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. My gear set is here. That's a whole nother story. So, short of a set of pump gears and some time, I believe I can assemble this transmission and hopefully solve a few of the mysteries that are my valve body. And that, once again, is a whole nother story. Soon, coming up.